Hey crafty friends, Gwen's here from Crafty Kiwi Mama. I've got a make that I'm partway through that I want to complete today. You'll see the panel that I've got here with my cool Scarecrow in his cornfield there and the bats against the moon. It's quite an amazing make, and the shine doesn't always show up quite as I wish it would. The nature of mica, you've got to catch the right light. But you can see there's a moon shape in the background there, and I've stenciled with Ranger black texture paste, the bats. And you might ask how I did that, because it's not the bat splay that we have in our Whimsy Stamps Creatures stencil, Halloween Creature stencil. It's a slightly different layout. That's a very cool stencil. I do love it. But I wanted a specific sort of, flying pattern for the bats with this particular one. And I remembered that I had a creation that I'd made last year that I ended up making a stencil for. And you may remember that make. I had such fun making this last year, and I really loved it as a finished piece that I've kept it to have as Halloween decor. I don't know if you'll catch. Oh yeah, you can see when I tap it into the light there. Can you see that mica? Amazing, amazing, amazing. Anyway, that was a very cool make I made last year. But what I'm referencing are these little shapes of bats here in the background that were done with stencil paste. And then I've obviously put some little 3D bats over the top. But the ones that are in the background here were done with this particular stencil. And I've cut this. The first time I did this, it was a happy accident, basically. I've cut it from a Spellbinder's shim. So it's very, very thin mylar. And the first time I did it, as I say, I had a die upside down, and I had the shim on the wrong side of the die, and I actually cut into the shim. I was so cross with myself until I realised it could be used as a stencil. So I ended up turning that into a moon stencil, because it was actually just a circle shape that I'd cut. So it was very cool that I was able to do to kind of save that piece of mylar and use it again. So that was a nice happy save. The other thing was I realised that the mylar is quite inexpensive as a piece of kit to buy if you compare it to the price of something like Duralar, which would also be fantastic. But I feel like the price point is slightly higher on the Duralar than it is on this. I may be wrong. But you get a pack of a couple of these shims from Spellbinders for not a massive price. And so I've ended up using a couple of my shims specifically as stencil bases. They're made from mylar, I believe. And they work really well. And because they're sort of a plasticky material, they stand up to stenciling and being cut through really, really well. So I've made my own bat stencil using a whole series of different shapes of Whimsy Stamps bats, etc. I'll tell you the ones I've used. This little section here are from the Bat Reveals die. It's a border die, but it comes with this little splay of bats as a separate die, and worked really well just for a little cluster of bats in the middle there. These three here with the sort of sharper edge to the wings, and I put another one from that same set down here. They're from the Build a Graveyard bat trio. And then these other ones with the very sort of what I think of as elegant wings, they come from the Dracula Going Batty. And I've just die cut them as I wanted to kind of have the splay of bats going across the stencil. And I've used it now, not just for that first make, which I showed you a moment ago, which I think is a very, very cool make with its amazing mica finish. And it's the bats in the background here I'm referring to. But also on my new piece, which I'm doing as a Scarecrow out in his cornfield. So these little bats here were taken from that same stencil. And I did the first three, as you can see, that's those three there, which I've stenciled in place. And then I decided I wanted to have one with a bigger wingspan, so I sort of taped off that. Oh, I might have done that back to front. Oh yeah, that's clever. I've actually turned that because I wanted the bat to be in the opposite direction. So I've flipped my stencil and done it back to front so that it fit the scene better. And then I did another one from that initial trio of bats from the top there down the bottom. In order to get all of those stenciled on the same piece, I did have to do it in 3 different sittings, which is why I haven't filmed it, because it's quite a time-consuming process. I wanted to have 5. There's something about odd numbers on card making that's very pleasing to the eye, so I didn't want to just stop at 4. I felt the piece needed 1 extra bat at the base, as if it's more in the background, which I really liked, and I think that works really well. My Scarecrow character comes from the Scarecrow set, which I believe is called Sleepy Hollow. I didn't do him too scary. I kept it sort of very tone on tone, but you can just see in the right light there's a little bit of shimmer on the inside of the eyes and the mouth, sort of make him a little bit more sinister. That piece started off very similarly to the cat piece I did. I think it was my second video that I put live when I started doing these videos. What I wanted to say about that was I did the panels at the same time, and the cat one was the beautiful sort of teals and blues and greens background. They were done with these distress crayons, so obviously different colours for the previous one. But for this one I've used fossilized amber and peeled paint, laid on a watercolour paper. It's quite thin, it's not very heavy. It has a deckled edge on it, which I really loved, so I wanted to keep the whole piece, even though it's not really a size that I would normally create with. It's not A2 sized. It's narrower, I think, than A2 and slightly longer, so it's sort of an odd size. But I really love it, and I think that the deckled edge is really fun, so I wanted to stay with that and play with it a little bit. So I used the distress crayons, peeled paint and fossilized amber to create that texture and that background and that colour, the same way that I did the kitty cat one that was done with the bramble wreath stamp set. And then I stamped in gold some of the cornrows over the top of that, which were taken from that same stamp set as the Scarecrow, which I believe is called the Sleepy Hollow stamp set. And the black cornrows I added on afterwards. The trick with that is when you've got gold in the background, getting something to stamp over the top of that without the gold resisting it is a little bit of a trick. So that is where I pulled in my VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, which is very good at adhering to textures and backgrounds that other inks don't grab very well. But it wasn't perfect, so I did end up pulling out my Fudibiori. It's a pen that will sit over the top of other inks and things quite nicely. It's a water-based pen that seems to sit on top of the VersaFine Clear relatively well. So I've added in a few extra details to put the colour back where the gold resisted it. And I filled in quite a bit of the Scarecrow, which, because he's sitting over that gold cornfield, you don't see that quite as well when it's resisting. So I did go back over very carefully the artist drawn lines with the Fudibiori pen just to add back in some of that colour that had been resisted by the gold. Anyway, long way of saying this is not just a stamp and go kind of process. There is layers on layers of creating within this. Before I did the application of the bats, I masked off the moon section here, which I just did with like a stick-on mask that I cut out the circle from, and then I did the negative of that to mask off the area I didn't want the mica to sit on, and then I've sprayed it with a couple of different mica stains, and I'm pretty sure the one I used there was Flickering Candle and possibly some Harvest Moon. Pretty sure it was Harvest Moon. Deceptive. When you first look at it front on, it's not a lot going on, but the minute you tip it into the light, it's like, wow, you see the gold cornfields and you see the beautiful mica on the moon, and it's really striking. So that is a fun piece. Because I had done the little pussycat that was under the bramble wreath, a much more simple design where I'd essentially just black matte framed it, I didn't want to do the two pieces identical. I didn't want them to be carbon copies of each other. I wanted to step this up a little bit and have something a wee bit different with these two panels being such a similar base, and that I had used the distress crayon for both of them and, watercoloured for both of them and essentially silhouette stamped the scenes for both of them. And I was like, well, it's a little bit boring if you do them the same both times. So I've kind of sat with this, even though I did the inking, and a lot of this was done at around the same time as I did that blue panel for the cats. I tucked it away. So then I thought about it a little bit more, and I decided rather than just plain black frame it, which, it looks amazing, but I wanted to step it up a little bit. So I had the idea to actually do this as the insert in a design and have a peekaboo window that looks through to the scene behind it. So that's actually what I'm going to do. And I remembered in one of our Easter sets. I can't recall what it's called, but I will put the little pop-up of the icon in the top right for you to have a look at. I've loved this. I think it's amazing. And it reminds me of travelling the bee roads in England when we were living there and seeing the little hedgerows. And you'd just be out in the countryside and suddenly there's this amazing little cut through a hedgerow that showed a beautiful garden beyond, a secret garden kind of idea. And I've always loved that. So I played with the idea of this being a cut through a hedgerow sort of idea, showing the scene behind of the cornfield. So I've yet to stick down the panel there. My bats are all dry and ready to be stuck down, so that bit is kind of ready to go. But then, of course, the front panel, I've used amazing, beautiful, shimmery cardstock from our fantastic sponsors for September and October, Cardstock Warehouse. This is their Black Onyx Star Dream paper, and it's just gorgeous. And it has just such a lovely shimmer and shine and sheen to it. The paper itself is so heavy, I had to mat this several times to die cut through it because it's substantial. It's really a significant depth to the paper. So it took several passes because it's quite an intricate die. It took several passes to get those lovely gaps nicely cutting through. But it was well worth persisting, and I just shimmed it a few different times in different areas that were resisting a wee bit more. Then I came to the stage of thinking, what am I going to do to create a little bit more interest on the front of this panel with that little peek through to the cornfield, and decided I'm going to try this Halloween sentiment, which comes from one of our newer Halloween die sets this year. It's actually from the Itty Bitty Border Stamps. And there's such a cool range of these, and it happened to have this sort of drippy Halloween word. And if you look at it closely, you can see that it sort of has a bit of an angle, as if it's following an arch sort of shape. And I thought, well, how perfect is that for following the top of the arch here? So this is where I've got to now. I'm almost at the next stage of things with this particular make, ready to take it to the next level. I want to put Halloween up here, and then I need to think about something that I'm going to put down here. I had thought Halloween is coming was what I wanted to put at the bottom, but I haven't been able to find a sentiment set that says is coming. So I'm still looking for how to finish that, but we're at the stage of testing the paper for heat embossing the sentiment onto it. So I've got the little offcut from the center of this that I'm going to now prep the paper, and we're going to test how this is going to take our embossing ink and embossing powders to see what's going to work best with this. I'm thinking, because I've got goldy cornfields, it would be kind of fun to have Halloween in gold, but I also really love the idea of just doing a black on black stamping. So that's what we're going to try. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. You can watch as I do. Hopefully we'll speed this up and there won't be quite so much chat while I do this aspect of it, because this can be a little bit of a laborious process, but you might want to just see how it turns out with the two different options for that. I'm just going to prime my stamp by running my hand across it, which just takes the coating from manufacturing processes off of that. And I'm just going to do it in black, because if you are familiar with VersaFine clear inks, you'll know that they are pigment ink. And so therefore they emboss incredibly well with all sorts of different coloured powders. Because the powders I'll be using are opaque and not clear, not transparent, it will take the different embossing powders really well. So I'm just going to pop that there. I've got two possible options. I think I'm going to try this first one, which is brand new to me. It's called Liquid Platinum. I bought it just recently. It's a Ranger Ink. It's a Ranger Ink embossing powder, and it's not a silver and it's not a gold. It's a platinum. It's sort of a mix of the two. Now, don't be too stressed about me not prepping the panel particularly well at this stage. This is just a practice piece. I'm not stressed about getting it perfect. I'm not going to use it on anything else. This is literally just to test which colorway I like best for this process. So that's our platinum, and I will run off and go and heat emboss that, and then we'll come back and do the next bit. Okay, so that's option number one, which is a really lovely sort of well, it's called platinum, liquid platinum. And actually with the hues that we've got in here, without it being too brassy or bold, I think that's going to be my winner before I even test the second one, but I will test it. So I'm going to flip that over. That's now completely dry. We're going to turn over to the other side. Now, as I say, I'm not stressed about this being perfect, but I do want to try and get it, you know, to look a little bit semi-decent. So next one we're going to do the same way. This, I'm going to use the Brutus Monroe. This is called, tell you in a second when I remember, Gilded, which you can see is quite a different colour from the platinum. Absolutely loving that platinum. I think that's going to be the one we're going to go for. But that's the Gilded, and we'll give that a quick emboss. I'll be back in a tick. So as I said, that's the Brutus Monroe Gilded colour, and I'll show you the difference between the two. So we've got the platinum one and the Gilded from Brutus Monroe. This one here is the platinum, liquid platinum, which I just think that's lovely. It's not silver and it's not gold. It's sort of definitely platinum, somewhere in between. Very cool finish on that. And then, whoops, the gold one, the Gilded one from Brutus Monroe. That embossing powder is very definite. Beautiful. Like, I really love it. Gilded colour. But what's the winner going to be, do we think? I feel like that makes it look a bit too austere. That sort of got a bit more, fits with the slightly more spooky, grungy vibes. And I wouldn't even care if it finished like that if I hadn't put the powder down on that previous side. Like, that's come up so beautifully. You can see the difference between a side that's had the anti-static powder applied and it's come up really cleanly versus me being just a little bit fly off the, you know, cuff and just go for it with a more grungy look. But that grungy look kind of works with what we're doing. So if I do get any overspill on this, I'm not going to cry. Because I think that actually looks really grungy and really cool. So we're going to use the platinum one. So I'm going to put away my Brutus Monroe and pull out the Ranger Liquid Platinum. And now we're going to do it for reals. And I better be sure that I know what I'm doing here. I'm always a bit nervous to do things without my stamping platform in case I need to stamp it more than once. So just given that our surface is sort of springing up a little bit and I may have a few surprises along the way, I think I'll use my Misty just to ensure it stays down and doesn't bounce up, so that we have a nice secure kind of hold on what we're embossing. And oh yeah, I don't like doing this bit in here, so I might just pull this out again for a split second while I do the application of the anti-static powder. I know I said it, I wouldn't be sad if it didn't sort of come out cleanly, but we're still going to try. I'm not intentionally wanting that embossing powder overspill, so we'll treat it with the intention of having it finish more cleanly. But as I said, if it doesn't come out super clean and we get a bit of embossing powder over cling, that's not going to be the end of the world for me. I'm not distressed by the idea of that. I am going to need to clean that very quickly because I need to line it up on the door of the Misty. So bear with me a second while I do that. So I'm just drying off the stamp, having wiped it down to emboss it. And I'm just going to line up exactly where I want this. Am I happy with that? I think so. Yes, I think that's going to be good. So we are going to grab our VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink. Because it's black on black, I'm not sort of stressed about the fact that you can see that there's black underneath it. As I say, you don't see that there's black ink underneath the embossing powder because the embossing powder is completely opaque. It doesn't actually alter the way that the powder looks. And when it's a darker colour like a platinum or a gold, etc., it's just a non-issue. So you absolutely can, quite comfortably, use your, sorry, just grabbing for my press tool. I really love this one. I like that it's got square edges, because my Misty has square edges, and I think that's really clever design. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I think I'm good with that. My H possibly needs just a little more on the juicing up there. So we're going to keep that exactly where it was and just stamp down a second time. I like the sort of even pressure that using a press tool like that gives. Okay, we're going to pull out our panel. I'm going to pop on the platinum, the liquid platinum embossing powder. And we're going to be very careful when we heat emboss this. Okay, and you can see there's a couple of little sections that haven't sort of resisted the powder quite as well after being treated with the anti-static tool, but it's not at all going to be difficult to lift those and get those to release that little bit of powder. I'm just going to grab, it's just a paintbrush. Sorry, brain's not engaging while I'm doing the actual cleaning, to say the words. I think that looks pretty good. I've got one little section there that I can see in the light that seems to be grabbing a bit more than it should. It also could just be little shimmers from the cardstock. So I think that's good. Okay, just flick off the powder from the end of my paintbrush. I'm really happy with that, and I'll be back in a second. I'm going to heat it both from the top and the bottom because I don't really want to warp that paper terribly much. So I'm going to heat the tool really well so it's good and hot when it comes up. Okay, and that's fully embossed now with the word Halloween. So now I'm just going to find what I'm going to put in the bottom of that, but we're getting very close to being able to complete the design for this particular piece. I just need to look to see if I can find a sentiment in amongst my sentiment sets that says is coming, so I can finish it Halloween is coming. That would be really cool. I would love that so much if that could be the case. I think that'll look amazing, amazing. And that'll be kind of our piece once it's finished. I'm going to stop there. It'll be a surprise in the end photos what I end up with down here, because I'm going to have a little hunt and play with that, so I won't come back and show that part of the process. It's essentially exactly what I've done there, and it'll be a mystery. I'm pretty sure I'm going to heat emboss it rather than add something on or do a die cut of some nature. I think I want to keep it like that, and I'm not going to put anything inside. It's just literally going to be that image panel stuck down. So that's it, folks. That's going to be a completed piece for today. Thanks for coming to visit. Always appreciate it when you leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the process. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.